I was a graduate student at the University of Toronto. Would have been 2008 to about 2012. So I did my graduate studies at OISE. I did my master's degree, and I also started the PhD program there as well at OISE before I came to and moved back to New Brunswick. So I think it was at a sexual diversity studies event where I can't remember the event. I have no idea what it was. I mean, for me, it feels like it's been so long ago now. But I definitely remember that Ralph was there for sure. And I remember at the event, I was talking a bit about my research. And my research was looking at the time in my master's degree at LGBTQ Christians. So I was very interested in how LGBTQ Christians, particularly in rural settings, sort of navigate or negotiate what is often a very challenging relationship between how they view their own sexuality and how they view the relationship to the church and to their community. And so I remember after I sort of talked about this a bit, Ralph, from what I remember, approached me and was sort of like, "Oh my gosh, you have to hear about this group. Like, you need to come join us. What you're doing is exactly in line with what we talk about." And it was at that moment where I was kind of like, "Okay, well, this sounds really great." And I think shortly after that, I attended my first meeting. I kind of came in once it was a little bit established. I don't know how they do it now, but we would meet sometimes at a cafe. Sometimes we met at I think it was St. Michael's. They had like a almost like eating area we could meet in, like a lounge. We sometimes met at I think it was called the Multi-Faith Center or something. Sorry. It was never a huge group, but maybe sometimes up to 20 if it was like or maybe even 25 if it was a really interesting topic, where you got more people out to come and talk or listen or whatever it was. I remember at the time it was funny. We had to have, I think for U of T, you have to have special roles designated to be considered like an official club or group on campus. So we all had to have like official titles, like you're the head of outreach and support, or you're the president and you're the vice president and stuff like that. But we didn't really stick to those design roles, and we all kind of knew that from the beginning. We just knew that we needed to sort of have those positions laid out. In the beginning, we were sort of just trying to figure out what worked and what didn't. In terms of did we want to meet and just talk about our personal issues, our own personal struggles with maybe our sexuality and our religion, or our successes, our things that really made us feel comfortable and happy? Or did we want it to be more a space where we sort of challenge people to think differently, or have guest speakers come in and have meals where everybody can meet together? So we really were trying to figure like, what are we? What is this group meant to be? And I don't think we ever quite figured that out. I think for a long time, some people would show up, and the people showing up would be there because they wanted to talk. They wanted to share their story, and they just needed support. They wanted to be around people who might understand them. And then we had people show up that just wanted to hear a guest speaker talk about something more maybe say academic or political. So we tried, I think, to figure out how to make that work, but I don't think we ever came to some sort of like solid conclusion that like this is the formula that works. We just kind of kept going along and doing our best. The idea that there was maybe a group of, let's say like Abrahamic religious folk that were also like super wanting to talk about what it meant to be queer or trans or to be open in a space like that. And also we're not struggling with it. We're sort of like had come to some sort of resolution that there wasn't necessarily some contradiction in being religious and also being queer. For me at the time, I remember thinking like, what? Like these people exist? This is a thing? I'm coming from New Brunswick where like I was the only one. Well, according to me, right? Of course, there was others, but here, and even still in New Brunswick, there's very much a atmosphere of silence and invisibility. I should also mention too, my father is a United Baptist minister in the Christian faith, and so I grew up in a very sort of like Christian background area with from what I remember, no queer people or trans people at all. To all of a sudden going to U of T, living in Toronto, and having someone like Ralph, who was a minister, approach me and be like, "Hi, like I'm completely accepting, and I myself am queer." I'm like, "What? Like, this is like, who are these people? How does this even make sense?" So, of course, right off the bat, I was like, "Well, yeah, like, please, I'd love to be around all of you." I think that Marilyn and Ralph Carl, the two of them as sort of like adult, I mean, of course I'm an adult, but they felt, like older adults who were really just fully accepting and open and also very loving and caring individuals. They sort of presented a presence in, I think, a lot of our lives, particularly as obviously I can speak for myself and my life, where I just remember thinking like, wow, like there are people out there that are of faith and are not awful, are not bigoted, are completely open to different kinds of ways of thinking, different ways of interpreting things, fluidity. And they were just such loving and caring people. Ralph would have done anything for any of us. Same as Marilyn. I remember Marilyn, every time you'd see her, she'd give you a hug, and she might have just met you last week. And I think having people like that around you was such a strange thing, because growing up queer and Christian, I didn't have a lot of older adults who would have just kind of knew that about me, but then still accepted and loved me. They made me feel very, I think the word I'm looking for is protected. There was a certain kind of protection there, in a way that wasn't like they're like a shield where they're there to fight your battles for you, but just where it was like, we got you. And it wasn't parental either. So I don't want it to become this sort of like maternal or paternal relationship thing. It was more just that sort of uniqueness that I think can occur in queer communities, where elder queer people and allies can become parts of our families, when maybe our real families don't really feel like they are that for us. They don't really represent those figures. And yeah,